Are you a scaling SaaS founder?
Ready to make the leap from leading a team to leading an organization? Join us each week as we refill your think tank with actionable tips and strategies from great business minds you know and those you don't know yet. This is SaaS Fuel with your host, 5-time entrepreneur, SaaS founder, and globetrotting adventurer, Jeff Maines.
Welcome back to the SaaS Fuel podcast, where new friendships are like discovering a hidden gem on a tropical island, brightening your day and making life a little more interesting. I'm your host, Jeff Maines. I help B2B SaaS founders like you grow from traction to scale. Here, growth is more than just numbers. It's about crafting a future-proof company, premium valuation, and leaders who build a business of significance while living epic, adventurous lives. I mentioned last time that I spent the last week in Fiji with some of the smartest, most generous founders, leaders, and CEOs on the planet. Some new friends, some old connections, and many who have been friends for 10 years or more. Exceptionally cool people that, I kind of want to name drop, but people always say, wow, you know that person? It's like, yeah, we've been friends since way back before he, she was that person you think you know publicly. And as leaders, we need that. People who know us for who we are, at our best, at our worst, and everything in between. Being a CEO can be lonely and overwhelming journey. The weight of decision making, the pressure to perform, the constant need for innovation can really create a sense of isolation. And without the right support network, it's easy to feel like you're navigating these challenges alone. Traditional leadership approaches often focus on internal strategies, and that's not a bad place to start. But what if the key to overcoming these challenges lies outside of you and outside of your organization? Last week, one of my longtime friends and mentors told a story about wanting to go to a high-profile, super exclusive event. It's one of those things impossible to get into. And his wife was asking him, who the speakers were. He's like, I don't know. So what's the content? He goes, I don't know. She's like, well, why do you want to go? And he said, I just know I will meet people there who are going to be part of my future. And he was 100% right about that. And that story really resonated with me because that has been my experience with this group and a handful of others. And certainly the exception. There's a lot of groups out there that are kind of so-so, but well worth the effort to go try to find the hidden gems. And here are just a few of the ways that they impact me and my success. One of my first big takeaways was shared wisdom and experience. A great community or peer group brings together leaders from diverse industries and backgrounds, and that's absolutely the case here. And in engaging with peers, I've gained a wealth of knowledge and experience that can provide fresh perspectives on common challenges. They see what I can't. They've experienced what I have and what I haven't. And getting perspective from someone who's faced similar issues accelerates problem solving and sparks innovative ideas, especially when they give with no strings attached. And the second big one is emotional support and accountability. The pressure of leading a company can be intense, but being a part of a community provides emotional support that's often missing in the CEO role. And I know some of you are tough guys, all business, never a down moment, but peer groups provide a safe space to share struggles, fears, successes with others who understand the unique challenges of leadership. Now, I read a quote this last week, hang out with winners, that way when you talk about your wins, it won't sound like bragging. I thought that is just one of the greatest things I've ever heard. But having that support network around you when things are great, when things are not so great. And a support network not only helps reduce stress, but also holds us as CEOs accountable for our goals. Because a lot of times, there's nobody else in the organization, maybe the board to some degree, but it holds us accountable to our goals, fostering both personal and professional growth. And my group has been there for highs, for lows, when I was absolutely burning out, when I was burning down, I was ready to quit, and when I was ready to soar. And there is so much value in that. And the third big one for me is expanded networks and opportunities. And this one has absolutely been huge. It opens doors to new opportunities and crazy situations, people that you meet and come in contact with and build relationships with. A couple of events ago, I'm sitting between someone on the left who's won 21 Emmys, one side, and someone on the other side, 16 Grammys. I mean, totally different networks than mine, right? And whether that's through strategic partnerships, collaborations, or simply expanding your professional network, being part of a peer group can lead to valuable connections that might otherwise be beyond our reach, or be introduced to people that are just completely outside of our sphere of influence. Very cool stuff. But those kinds of relationships, you build those over time, and it drives business growth, creates opportunities for all sorts of things, mentorship, learning, or sometimes, even better, they can just develop into great friendships. And every time that we get together, I leave different. And it's almost like a tattoo, forever marked, forever impacted, forever changed. And I can say with complete confidence that this last week, I met people who are absolutely going to be part of my future. My guest today is Eric Mersch, brings over 24 years of finance expertise, including CFO roles at 2 public companies and nearly 40 SaaS and tech-enabled services companies backed by top venture capital and private equity firms. With deep experience in SaaS and subscription business models, Eric authored Hacking SaaS, an insider's guide to managing software business success. Former submarine officer with an MBA from Harvard Business School, Eric has navigated the complexities of industries like cloud computing, cybersecurity, and fintech. Welcome a true expert in driving financial success in tech, Eric Mersch. Hey Eric, welcome to SaaS Fuel.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Jeff.
Well, you have 24 years experience in finance and as a CFO. What are some key moments that significantly shaped your approach to managing SaaS and tech-enabled service companies?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the seminal moments would be so my first job in corporate America is where I really learned how to do corporate planning. And this isn't SaaS, but I always encourage young people, to spend time in corporate America because that's the best practice, right?
Sure.
As director of corporate planning, I worked with the CFO and I learned how the CFO job should work. In my first public company CFO job, we were a streaming media company. And this was in 2006 and 2007 when a lot of the SaaS metrics weren't developed. And
Sure.
So I was coming up with them on my own, but I didn't have a resource, right? I was just learning. It was like an apprenticeship. And at the time, investors didn't focus on the typical SaaS metrics that everyone does today, Rule of 40 and LTV to CAC and all these other metrics that we can talk about. And so kind of developing on my own, wrestling with the data, right? Getting my hands on the data. That was very valuable too. And I would not have done well if I had not started there. And then next stop would be my second public company CFO job, which is where we were a services business. And services is a very powerful business model. Yes. We can talk about how people start in services and move to software. And that's what we are trying to do with this company. And we built an emerging SaaS business, very successful, highly scalable. And then we sold the company. Then I started doing this interim CFO work. Mainly, the main goal was, again, get my hands on the data, run the cohort analysis. And at the time, more people were talking about it. So I was just soaking in as much information. Again, it was more of an apprenticeship, right? And so working with the data, talking to investors, presenting at boards, and actually it turns out to be a really great fit for me, this interim CFO job. But that's where I gained all of my experience over those last 8 years. That's where I worked with over 40 different SaaS companies, either as interim CFO or as advisor to the CFO, advisor to the board. And that's where my book comes from. It's that information, that apprenticeship that I went through, I put into an educational book that provides a comprehensive view of the fundamentals of the business model.
Yeah. And it is a great book as well. The book is Hacking SaaS, an insider's guide to managing software business success. What are some pivotal lessons from the book that every SaaS founder should know?
I talk a lot about, financial questions, go to market, the metrics that, a person should learn. But the key lesson from the book is how to calculate those metrics properly, how to structure your P&L properly, what reports should you do, but then take that information and provide strategic guidance, to your boss, to the CFO, to the executive management team. And so you have all this data, but it's not about calculating the numbers. It's about presenting the numbers and drawing out ideas for strategic. It's about being a good business partner. It's about the CFO and the chief revenue officer having the same numbers at a board meeting and really providing this guidance to the board.
That's really, really good. And so thinking about board meetings, a lot of times, executives will go in and present data, and, I'm sure you've experienced this where maybe, sales has their data they're presenting and the CFO has data and marketing has data, and they come in together, but they don't necessarily have the same story of the data.
Yeah, this is such a big problem that I've seen over the last 8 years, and it continues. And it's really, as a CFO, we talk about the accounting system as a single source of truth. But then Salesforce talks about its software as being the single source of truth.
Of course.
Well, if I pulled, I don't want to say anything bad against Salesforce, but I wish they'd stop saying that single source of truth, because it doesn't feed back into the profitability of the business. It doesn't tell you, if a deal is profitable, right? That's the CFO's job. And so when the CFO and the CRO go in with their respective single sources of truth, it causes all this confusion in the board meeting. And I actually replaced the CFO who did that. He went in with a set of metrics and a set of strategic guidance that didn't match what the CRO did. He wasn't as respected. He didn't know SaaS. And so he was the one who was terminated. And I came in and reconciled that. I grabbed the CRO close and got our numbers together, reconciled them. And then the next board meeting went in and presented, not just the right numbers between us, but the right KPIs that the board should see to run the business. So it's so critical. And I think, not to pitch my book, but if you have the book and it gives you the credibility, and if you have the knowledge, so if they're watching your long form content, and I love your short form content as well, if you're learning that, well, you say, I studied these influencers, right? Jeff Maines, David Spitz, Ray Reiki, Ben Murray. And so this is where my knowledge comes from, these top influencers, or the book. And you go in and someone questions you on the data, and you have this credibility. You didn't make it up. It wasn't something you learned on your own, you made up on your own or figured out on your own. You have this community of information. So
right.
The number one summary, I would say, don't go to the board meeting with different numbers than the CRO or any other executive.
And the numbers definitely tell a story. And it's not just about having numbers or even right numbers. And we definitely want them to be right. But I think it's even more important is that we know what they mean and can take action and make decisions based on those numbers.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, I've had clients where the interim person's job is to go in and, keep the trains running, of course, but also set the company up for success in a strategic way. And I see this all the time where the CFO will just compile the books and then just send them out with no context. Like, here are your financials.
Right.
What I learned from that, tell me the story, tell me the narrative. Every set of metrics has to have this narrative. And even better, if you can create the narrative and then create the recommendation. For example, we have a direct and indirect sales force, for example, hypothetically, right? And the direct sales force has an LTV to CAC of 0.8, and indirect sales force has an LTV to CAC of 2. Well, put more money against the indirect, right? I mean, you can draw these conclusions out, but you have to know what the numbers are first.
Yeah, and have to have confidence that the numbers are actually the numbers.
Boy, that's so true, because, it goes back to that credibility issue. And I've seen board meetings where this valuable time is, eaten up by arguments over how people should calculate a certain number. And it's not productive. And if you're stuck in that debate in the board meeting, all the strategic guidance and that you've brought, the CFO's brought to the board meeting, well, you're not going to get that chance to have that discussion. It's going to kick even 3 months to the next board meeting. So if you come in and say, this is how we're calculating, this is how Jeff Main's calculated, and this is how Ray Reich and how Ben Murray, this is the way it's done. And you go up against a board member who says, well, in my portfolio company of 5 SaaS companies the last 5 years, this is how we did it. And so, well, it's not best practice according to what I've read and what I've consumed via video. And sure. So it gives you that credibility. And you got to get past that, hey, why are we calculating this way? I don't think it's that. To here's the calculation, and here's what I think we should do about it.
Yeah. Making those decisions. A lot of times companies struggle in the $1 to $10 million ARR range, and that's our sweet spot for sure. And helping them get to that point. What do you think? What are the primary challenges you've seen? You worked with a lot of SaaS companies, and then how do they overcome those challenges, whether they be tech debt, operational debt, or financial debt?
Well, yeah, I love all this question, and this is, I think you call it Death Valley, and I've always called it the doldrums, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of companies can get to $1 million in revenue, and you've shown the numbers, I know. And a lot of companies, they can get product market fit for an ideal customer profile, and they get to $1 million, and or they're charismatic and they can sell, and they sell to their friends and I see this a lot. They sell to other VC portfolio companies. I'm like, okay, great, you got these, and they can get to $1 million, and maybe very quickly, maybe 18 months, maybe 2 years. They get to that point. That's super fast. And what founders get this false sense of success, I would say. Yes, they've been successful, but they don't really know how they've been successful. And this is where bringing in someone from the outside can be very helpful. But what that person has done doesn't scale, right? And I see this a lot. And even like the operational debt and tech debt, that really takes a backseat to the go-to-market strategy, right? So the company takes money and builds the minimal viable product, identifies the ICP or general idea of the ICP, and then the next funding round is to build the go-to-market strategy. And part of the funding for the MVP should be set aside to test different channels. Hire one direct salesperson and have them go out and see what sells, right? Or run targeted digital ads or implement account-based marketing. And there are all these channels that a person can do. And so companies should pick 1 to 3 channels, test them, and then whatever works, go back to the funders and say, okay, this is what works. If we put this money in, we're going to scale. And I work a lot with enterprise SaaS companies, and it's about that. In that case, getting to 10 million involves getting a professional go-to-market direct sales team in place. It doesn't have to be big, but you need something. If that shows signs of promise, that direct sales motion, and then you want to test it out. And then that's when you get to 10 million. And actually, and I know, but even operational debt is not as important in my experience to get to 10 million, because customer count can be very low, or in B2C, the ACV, annual contract value, is really low. And you can still, with a small team of even bookkeepers, handle that volume. Now, over 10 million, you need to fix all the operational debt. You need to go back, and that's expensive, but you need to get to 10 million first.
Yeah, sales solves a lot of those problems.
It does, yes. The right sales.
Right. And a lot of times I think it will mask some of those problems, which is, I'm a huge fan of the fractional model, and particularly fractional CFO. What stage companies would you say really need to be thinking about having at least a fractional CFO?
Yeah, I think at $10 million is a key point, because the company's proven MVP. They've identified an ideal customer profile. So who are they selling to? And they've shown that they have a repeatable sales cycle. Now that means, right, like we sent 5 sellers out and they've all, they've sold $1 million of bookings per year. Like,
Right.
that's great. And then you have renewals and you don't have the churn. And so now you're at 10 million. Or you had B2C and you did free trial or freemium or targeted direct or account-based marketing, those things. And now you've gotten to 10 million, but now you have to put in a real accounting system. Now, it doesn't have to be audited, obviously, and you can get by with bookkeepers, but a fractional CFO should come in at that point and then help fix some of the operating expense, but also help guide the repeatable sales motion so that we can grow to 30 million, because that is a phenomenal outcome if you can get to 30 million.
Right.
And then, so part of my job is, I typically don't work with companies of that size. So part of my job is that, and part of my job is larger companies. I have a client doing 160 million in revenue, for example, but that's also about a repeatable sales cycle, and they have high churn. They don't have a repeatable sales cycle. And what other channels, if that's not working, what other go-to-market strategy works? Let's look at channels. And we did, and we became very successful in channels. So it's still, and I do spend a lot of time in go-to-market because it's, if the CFO can't support the go-to-market strategy, then no one really knows how that sales motion affects the P&L. And that's why I talk about it a lot, both on events like this and in the book. But that's when you bring in a CFO in the short term, when you're small, and then when you're large.
I think that's really smart. I think a lot of people don't think about a CFO really being involved in the go-to-market. So explain how that works. So what is it? How do you support the go-to-market strategy and the sales process so that the chief revenue officer knows where to delegate more resources, or marketing, chief marketing officer may know how to allocate spend, or what channels are working, or what cohorts are most profitable, direct, indirect, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and this is such a great question, because people ask me, why am I involved in go-to-market strategy?
Right.
Why do I read all these sales books, Challenger Customer? And, why do I do that? And what I've found is the regardless of the go-to-market strategy, the numbers, the measuring success is very different. So enterprise salesperson, we have, we know what the metrics are for success for an enterprise salesperson, but the CRO may not see it that way, right? And so we may be pushing money down through a channel that's a low LTV to CAC, right? So the CFO can come in and say, okay, well, the account executive, the direct seller, should be generating 5 to 7 times in bookings what they get paid for their total cash and commission, right? Their base and commission salary. That's just one metric, right? And if you see that, then it's not working, right? And they may be great people and they may get us into accounts, but that's not working. The expansion rate at scale, a company should be growing 2/3 renewal, 2/3 expansion, and 1/3 new. This is true across 2,500 different SaaS companies, according to different benchmarking platforms I use. And so if a company differs from that, it's not as successful as it could be. Same thing for middle market, selling to the middle market. You can't afford a direct salesperson to bring in a $10,000 annual contract value, right?
Right.
So what are the best metrics? And in that case, you're really looking at, indirect means someone's picking up the phone when they call. Of course, you need marketing to generate those leads. And so You're really looking at dollars of marketing spent to, the productivity of that indirect. And then B2C is very similar, right? If you go out, and a marketing person might say, hey, we're buying leads at 6 cents per 1,000 leads. And that's unheard of. That's really successful. But if those leads don't convert, right. then it's not helping, right? So they may not be focused on the right metrics. And the only way to be a business partner as CFO is to be partners with them. and then tie those numbers back to the P&L. Like, yeah, you're in the top percentile of cost per lead, but it's not converting and it's not generating value for the company. And that's why I get involved so heavily in the go-to-market strategy.
That's really, really important in just being able to understand that and close the loop.
Yes.
Ultimately it matters not only what we sell, but that we're profitable, that, that there is a repeatable process in there and how we allocate those resources. And so having good data, having, solid financials behind it, and understand that, if I take this action, here's the result I expect, and be able to measure that instead of, just say, here's what we think is going to happen. And then you just go and you do your thing and nobody ever checks. Did it happen? Oh yeah, we sold.
Or someone trumpets their success. Right, look at all these leads we got at 10 cents per thousand, and that's really great. It doesn't happen in this industry because it's a gut feeling. There's no data behind it, or there's data behind it, but then it's not converting. Same thing in the pipeline. Wow, look at our pipeline. Pipeline should be 3 times your bookings for the next quarter. And that's a well-known fact. But if it's not converting, if you're not watching the value or the velocity of those leads, then, I don't care how big it is, it won't convert. And, everyone's trying to do their best. No one's trying to obfuscate or, not tell people the best, but people are attracted to success. And we have a natural, tendency to look at just the successful numbers. But if they don't generate adjusted, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, if it doesn't generate profitability, well, you're not doing as well as you could be. And that's where the CFO comes in.
Yeah. Well, why is strategic financial planning crucial, especially early in a company's development and then, ongoing? And what steps should founders be thinking about to implement that effectively?
Yeah, and that's such an important comment, and it is. One of the biggest, I guess, failures in terms of operation and debt is not building a forecast early enough. And I've seen companies where they go to the board and they get the budget approved in January or February or March even, right? Because for a lot of different reasons, they didn't get on top of it. They couldn't get the board's attention. And so they start the year with no budget. And that's a really big issue. No one really knows. And then if you do that, then it's not a best practice. For larger companies like my $160 million client now, we're starting in June with market planning, looking at the competitive forces and, what growth is possible. And then here's the process. Then you go to your team, the CFO goes to the team and says, okay, if we do this revenue, here's how much we can spend based on our access to capital. Right. And then you have all this horse trading. And then you really want to go in November to the board and say, here's our first draft. What do you think? And then they push back. And then you go back in December and you say, okay, this is what you want. And here's how we're going to execute. And then you start. So, when you're an earlier stage, you don't have to start in June, but it's very important to have a budget on January 1st of the year.
Yeah, that is really, really critical. And I like that. Starting most people wouldn't think that you have to start in June, but that makes a lot of sense. Ready to dominate your market and skyrocket your revenue? Dive into Small Fish, Big Pond, building a world-class business that swims circles around competitors. This book is packed with powerful marketing and leadership insights, guaranteed to transform your business and operate world-class. Small Fish, Big Pond delivers proven strategies to sharpen your marketing message, deliver unmatched value to your clients, and guide your prospects' buying journey to one inevitable conclusion: that your company is the only solution for them. Inside, you'll find step-by-step frameworks and time-tested growth principles to attract your ideal clients, convert them, and then turn them into your passionate brand ambassadors. Get your copy today in print, ebook, or audio at smallfishbigpond.com or on Amazon. Plus, remember, every book sale supports charity. All profits go to nonprofits. So dive in and make a difference. That you really do need, start now for 25 and start thinking about, what is that going to look like? What do we need to do? And how does that, play into our numbers and our plans for the rest of the year and next year. What kind of revenue do we need to hit to make sure that these budgets work for next year?
That's right. And, you can look at benchmarks and see what's achievable, right? What if other companies, how have they grown and why are we not growing? Why can't we grow at that? And for early stage companies, you don't have to put something down on paper, but you should be going to events. You should be learning about the industry. You should look for threats. You should look for opportunities, and that'll feed into the budget later on. And actually, I think I saw something where you recommended people going to events. And that's just really critical in talking to people, and people want to tell you about their solutions, so you can get a lot of information there. But I think that's the start of it, right? If it's on paper, great. If it's not, at least you're educating. The founder is educating him or herself about how fast can we grow? What are the threats? What are the opportunities? I looked at this product and it's weak in this area, and with this product, it's great in that area. Do I build features? I go to another vertical. It's just a great way to think through how you're going to grow next year.
Yeah. So a lot of companies will focus. EBITDA is something that is sadly missing in a lot of SaaS companies. But they'll focus on cash flow and runway. And why is it that understanding cash flow is vital for financial health? And how can businesses balance the two, cash flow and EBITDA?
Yeah, and again, this is such a great question because I would say 90% of the companies that I go into only forecast P&L. And they look at EBITDA and say, this is a proxy for cash flow. Look how great we're doing, on this. And, we're slightly negative or positive, but look how great this is. And when you go in and as interim CFO, I always have to get someone to build out the balance sheet and cash flow model. And I'll give you a couple examples, theoretical examples, but when you're an enterprise SaaS company and you get paid up front for 1 year, it really shortens the amount of capital you need to run the business because you're prepaying. People are prepaying. You have a negative working capital in that you're generating cash each month, each time you send. And,
right.
On the way up, that's great, right? And then what we're seeing now in this environment is those are coming down. That people are not renewing. It's harder to sell, and so you've already used up the cash that you were using to fund the business. And now that's not there because you don't have the renewals, you don't have the expansion, and you're not getting new business. And I actually replaced the CFO of a $350 million company because they did not forecast cash. And I could get into details, but they were looking at EBITDA saying this is great, but cash was going down every month and nobody could explain it. So that's example where a company can get in real trouble, and that's going on right now all over the business. Last year, I had a client that also same thing, didn't forecast cash. They had a 13-week, what's called a 13-week treasury cash flow, and they were just extending that out. Well, that's not connected to the sales motion. It's not connected to how we're bringing in business, and so. When I got there, I replaced that person. And when I got there, I said, wow, you have a zero cash and in 7 months. And they're like, no, that's not possible. And then when you show them the numbers, that's what it is. So let's go out and get a line of credit. And we did that. I had another client, enterprise SaaS client, same thing, growing really well. They did not forecast the key is in understanding how to forecast deferred revenue, and they did it wrong. And same thing, that CFO got exited. So, and if there's one takeaway from this, your question is make sure you know how to forecast cash and stick to that. Present that to the board. Tell the board EBITDA is not a proxy for cash flow.
Right.
Cash flow is a proxy for cash flow. And this is a mistake that I think all companies are making. And I'll give you an example on B2C, but let's say you go to market, here's another example of why the CFO and the chief marketing officer need to be connected. When you go to market, let's say, you were buying leads at 6 cents per thousand. That's really great. Let's pour money into this. Well, you're spending money in month one and you're recovering that money. In B2C, you're typically recovering that the next month or the month after, right?
Right.
But the more you spend, you're building up. It's called the working capital trowel, right? You're digging yourself a working capital hole, and at some point you're going to not be able to support it with your capital reserves. The other thing to keep in mind is if you go out and you buy X number of leads at 6 cents, well, the next Y set of leads is going to be at 10 cents. And after that, it's going to be at 13 cents. And so you're going to chase that cost up because you're in the market buying. You're going to chase that cost up.
Right.
Your own activity will chase it. And if you don't realize that, if you're just looking at our average cost per 1,000 is 12 cents. Well, if you don't realize that, what kind of trial that's, driven, the CFO is going to sit back and get all these invoices and from marketing, and they're not going to understand what's going on. So a couple examples there from both enterprise and business to consumer.
Yeah, that's really helpful to think about it that way. And I've seen it too, where companies are growing and their CAC payback period is too long. Maybe it's 6 or 8 months, and they sell themselves into a hole, and that's exactly what you're talking about. It's that working capital trough. And
then you have to go back to your investors, and going back between your A and B round or your B2C round is so painful, right? One, it's painful to have to ask, but also the terms you're going to get. You might get a convertible note to bridge your business, but you don't really know if your business is valuable because you haven't proven out your go-to-market strategy. So the terms you're going to get on, and typically it is debt, like a convertible note.
Yeah.
But what you'll see is, you pay back, you ultimately have to pay back that dollar value, but then there's also a conversion, right? So a convertible note will come with, not to get too technical, but it comes with a 3x multiple. So you're not paying back just the loan, you're paying 3 times that amount.
Right.
And so you're working your share of the business is dropping, and we don't want that, right?
Exactly.
For my clients. You don't want that. You don't want to be, and this happens all the time. And I see it in my business. I see it in the industry, but founders have a great idea. They make some missteps and they wind up with 2% of their company, down from 25%. And then they've lost all this upside.
Yeah. Extremely painful. I think it's something good to think about, and just the benefit of having a CFO that can see into the future and go, hey, 7 months from now, you're going to run out of money. And I think that's just so telling that you have executive management that we go, no, we're not. And you are. Here it is. But that's the thing is, if you know that that's going to happen in 7 months, you can fix it now, not scramble, 2 or 3 months before trying to raise or do something or figure it out.
Yeah, that's right. And the earlier you identify it, think of it this way: the sooner you identify it and take action, the greater your share will be in the business versus, showing up at the last minute and saying, oh, we have 3 weeks of cash left. We can't make payroll in November. And then you're just going to get this money with onerous terms, and you're not going to get equity for all the time and money and sweat equity you've put into the business.
Yeah. Time buys you options for sure.
Time buys you options. Yes. Well said.
Well, I think this is something worth even going a little deeper on, and beyond just checking bank balances. That's not cash flow management. But what should founders be doing to adopt an effective cash flow management strategy?
In SaaS, it's difficult in SaaS because there is such a difference between spending and receiving the cash, right?
Yep.
And it's hard to borrow against a line ARR, right? Because of the churn factor. Whereas if you're selling machinery, you can borrow against it and fill that working capital gap. We really don't have that. And this is particularly important for enterprise SaaS companies. So I'm paying money, I'm getting money up front. I sell something, I get the money up front, and I deliver the services over the next year, right? And the key to forecasting that, and this is in the weeds, but the key to forecasting that is understanding how to forecast deferred revenue. Because deferred revenue means all the liability you've taken on that you have to burn down by providing the service. So the higher your deferred revenue, the more trouble you will be in if you have high churn a year from now, right? And so it's a very difficult thing to forecast, and I don't see companies doing it well very often. I see a lot of times deferred revenue as a percent of revenue, but that doesn't tell you how much you're burning it down, how much you're burning your liabilities down. And so if there's one takeaway from this point, it's learn how to forecast deferred revenue. And again, this is unique to SaaS businesses, particularly enterprise SaaS businesses. And I replaced a CFO who will tell you that how important that was, and if that person had only done it, they'd still be in that role.
Yeah. We've worked nearly 40 companies backed by venture capital private equity firms, and that's different than the bootstrap world, which I love both of those. But what insights can you share about managing relationships with investors and navigating their expectations?
Yeah, that's great. I always like to say that the board meeting takes place before the board meeting, and it is a fine line. You never want to give one investor more information than another investor, because there's this tendency then for that investor to go around and say, hey, look what I learned from the business, right? Look, I'm really insightful. But there are opportunities to work with an individual board member and sync on the calculation of a certain KPI, right? Or educate a board member about, hey, here are the KPIs we use for the go-to-market strategy. So it's the fundamentals, educating them about the fundamentals. And it's not those one-on-one conversations. That's not the place for, a cash runway discussion, or, I hate, go-to-market strategy. It's not working. It's, here's how we measure go-to-market. And, we're still coming up with the numbers, but this is what you'll expect to see, this KPI. So again, have the board meeting before the board meeting, but don't reveal the narrative of the business.
That's really, really good advice. Well, looking ahead, what trends do you foresee in SaaS and in tech services, and how can companies prepare to capitalize on these trends? Yeah, this is great, and it's something I'm working with my clients now. And you see the rise of AI, and rise of AI is and AI companies and AI businesses, and this is I think a pivotal point for the industry and the efficiencies, and that's great. But it's important to remember that AI companies still need a business model, and the SaaS business model has proven to be the dominant way to sell software and sell AI support. Thanks again, Eric, for coming on the show and sharing your insights and resources. All links, highlights, resources, and full show notes are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to check us out on YouTube as well. Full episodes, video shorts, training, outtakes, all sorts of things. And, thought leaders share. So share this episode with someone who you want to be part of your future. It'll elevate you in their eyes for thinking of them and start a conversation. Everyone who shares this week gets a new friend. Maybe. Yeah, we'll do one better. Everyone who shares this week gets a friendship fizz machine. It dispenses fizzy drinks that instantly turns strangers into besties. Just add a conversation and watch the bubbles work their magic. Join us next week, which is my birthday week here in Fiji, and we're going to celebrate with a double SaaS Founder Week. Tuesday is Kirk Marple, CEO of Graphlet. We'll talk about revolutionizing unstructured data with simple APIs. What if unstructured data was just as easy to manage and mine and turn into actionable insights as structured data? And Thursday, we have founder Brad Dickinson, CEO of Social HP, an employee advocacy platform. We're going to be talking about the evolution of executive thought leadership, how it's become critical for the C-suite to be visible and transparent in order to build trust. So I will see you next time, and as always, enjoy the journey.
Thanks for listening to SaaS Fuel. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/SaaSFuel. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.